Hey everyone, welcome back to the Neo Marketing Podcast. This is part 2 of our crisis communication protocol conversation we started last episode based on a presentation Pritch and I did for the YMCA CMO conference that was here in Oklahoma City just a few weeks ago. Welcome to the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of modern business communication. Pritch, so we spent the last episode defining crisis, the different stages, the different elements, and we ended that episode. And if you haven't listened to it, please go back and check it out because you're really going to get a ton of information that will make a lot of sense with this episode. But we ended that episode talking about the reason you don't create plans, but you write crisis communication protocols.
Absolutely.
This is your baby. You love this conversation. So let the people know why the crisis plan is dead.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you can't plan for every eventuality.
That's true.
Going back to our the previous podcast, one of the truths that we said was no matter how well prepared you are, you will always be surprised.
Right.
That becomes particularly critical if you're trying to plan for every eventuality.
Yes.
So, oh my gosh, I've got an oil leak here. What do I have in the book? I got to look at the book. It's not there. I got to make something up. What do I do halfway in between these two plans? What do I do? That's not a good way to be,
No.
Particularly in the middle of a crisis.
But empowered employees who understand what everyone does in the chain of command, empowers them to make decisions and react to that scenario, right?
Yes, and it simplifies things. And again, as we've talked about, simple is good.
I love simple. Simple is best.
The military, in particular, the special operators are all, slow is fast, right? So protocol helps slow down things and makes you faster, actually, which is maybe counterintuitive. And the other thing is that the plan is obsolete as soon as you put the last dot on the page.
That's right, because it's actually on paper. It's written down. It's hard copy. It's not adapting and changing to the scenario.
Right. Back in the day, you used to have to carry a 3-ring binder around because it had all the responses that we needed to say about particular cases. A couple of page document that says who does what, who's got what information. That's pretty portable. You can carry that thing around on
right.
your...
And you can edit and update it on the fly.
Absolutely.
And if someone didn't bring it with them, you could send it to them all the way around the world, right. Anywhere they are, any time zone, anything, right?
Exactly.
These smart devices make that possible.
Make that possible, absolutely.
Pritch, go ahead and define succinctly a protocol versus a plan.
Okay, a protocol provides for the process. It's not how you answer, it's what you do to get the answers. Right? It's outlining processes and procedures. It focuses on process, and that obviates the need for you to cover every eventuality, which is good news. You can't do it.
No.
You can't cover all the eventualities. It streamlines your response effort. It provides increased autonomy, which is good because people are going to talk.
Back to the empowering your employees.
And empower your employees because they're talking over the back fence all the time. They always have been.
Right.
And it identifies, in particular, training needs.
So here's an irony I find when I'm trying to explain crisis communication protocols to a potential client or to clients we're working with that we're doing other things for, is I ask them, you have fire drills.
Right.
Sure. And everyone knows in a fire drill, right? They know the place that they go, and they know to check in with their supervisor or their direct report, and that person knows they take their clipboard, right, and they check off the names of the people in the department, and then HR comes around, they check all the department heads, and everyone's checked in, and all people are accounted for, and we're over here, and we're waiting for the response from the fire department, yada, yada, right? Everyone has had if you've worked in a place with more than 2 employees, you've had a
fire drills.
That's a protocol.
That's a pretty good definition of protocol.
Right. So if companies understand that protocol works and it's fast and effective in how long, I explained that in 30 seconds, right? As opposed to having a 3-ring binder of documentation.
Well, the difference would be if you're a planner, you're going to have a plan for a gas leak.
I'm a planner.
You're going to have a plan for a shooter. You're going to have a plan for a fire. You're going to have a plan for a chemical leak, right? Now, protocol, the alarm goes off, people go someplace and report in.
All they really need to know, the difference is if it's fire, you want out of the building. If it's a crime, if it's weather, if it's an earthquake, if it's something that's external, you want to stay in the building.
Shelter in place.
So some very basic things,
Yeah.
right? Get everyone out and account for them. Put everyone inside and account for them.
Right.
And then the process of managing what happens next, that's protocol.
That's protocol. That's exactly right.
So, Pritch, not just having a great protocol in place, but training and explaining the value of to everyone in the organization is essential, right?
Right. And in a plan, you can write training, but in a protocol, it really does, because you're focused on process, it really does help you identify gaps in your expertise,
Right.
gaps in understanding amongst the various players in the crisis. It is a great tool. One of the best benefits of a protocol is that it can help you identify your training needs.
And for me, it's the adaptability. It's the being able to take any situation that's thrown at you, any crisis, and respond to it in a very logical way, because you're not depending on something that may or may not have been written down, but just using the tools you have in place to the best of your knowledge. It's really one of those common sense arguments.
I think so. And based on our experience, and I've got a lot of it in crisis and media relations, how you respond, I mean, the process you use to seek information, to develop your messages, that doesn't change.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's malfeasance on the part of the CEO or if it's a product recall. What you're going to do to respond to that crisis never changes.
So go ahead and put the nail in the coffin of the plan.
Thank you.
Give us some reasons why a plan is the old, not great way of doing things.
First of all, the plan describes step by step what you're going to do. Step 1, open up the emergency manual. Step 2 is you call so-and-so. Yeah. I'm getting bored. And plans focus on how to respond, not what to do to respond,
Yes.
which is a big differentiator.
There's a ton of gray area to what to actually do.
Yep.
Goes back to the common sense.
Goes back to the common sense thing. Plans do not provide perspective.
Because they can't, because of the eventualities and the changes in the situation.
Exactly. They're hardwired, if you will.
That's right.
And protocols give you the opportunity to have some perspective on things, whereas a plan doesn't.
Which makes a plan essentially obsolete the moment you write it.
Absolutely. What constitutes a good protocol, you might ask?
That's the question of the hour right there, at least the half hour we have on the podcast today.
Clearly documented lines of accountability.
Yes.
Is the most critical aspect of a protocol. And by that, translated, that means lanes.
Yes.
So operations has got its lane.
Do what you do best.
Do what you do best.
And do what you get paid to do.
Exactly, right? So it does help you establish those critical lines of accountability.
Now, Pritch, you mentioned earlier that the old days when you had plans, you had to carry a 3-ring binder around, which
Right.
makes it sound like there was a lot of information there, right?
Right.
So I'm assuming maybe a protocol has a lot of information, right?
No.
That was a trick question.
A long protocol is 3 pages.
Right?
Right. An ideal protocol is about 2.
And we've said it multiple times today, and we've said multiple times on the last podcast, simplicity is good.
Right, because simplicity gives you clarity.
Yes.
And brevity is an advantage.
Absolutely.
In terms of figuring out how to respond. And a protocol helps you to incorporate your organizational values, because at the base of it, and the most common denominator
Right.
of a protocol is the philosophy section.
Yes.
Which is basically repeating your organizational values. So you have to have an intro. This is what the protocol is.
I'm going to jump in real quick
Okay,
though
sure.
about organizational values, because this is one of those things I think a lot of people give a lot of lip service to, and they don't really spend the time to do a really good job with organizational values. So I want to really knock that out. So I really want to drive this point home, okay?
Absolutely.
A lot of lip service to organizational values, core values, all these things, and then when the shit hits the fan, This is the one time that you, as the communication professional, have to be dead set on, we set out these core values. This is who we are as a company. We're going to stick to them. We can't cut corners here. We can't cheat. We can't, we'll admit to this and not to that and do things like this that are outside those core values. This is the opportunity to present those real core values. And it goes back to what we've said many times in this, the two-part conversation is your response to the crisis is as important, maybe even more than the actual crisis itself.
Right.
So the core values, understanding what your business stands for, what you do and what you don't do, what you're willing to say and what you're not willing to ever go, those roads you won't ever go down as an organization, not just for the public, but for the people that work there and the people that do business with you, all those things. So I'm a big stickler here when it comes to organizational values and not just giving lip service, but actually living by them once you write them down. And so this is a great opportunity when it comes to crisis response to live by, even if it hurts you in the short term, but it will benefit you in the long term. Your response, when you own up when you've been wrong, when you fix things that could have done better, etc. And so the organizational values being the biggest part of a protocol plan, a protocol, not a plan.
Right.
Every time I say protocol or plan, that I see Pritch twitch a little bit, like not a plan. The protocol starts with your core values and institutional mores because it's that important and because that's going to guide your decision making and how you respond to the story.
For decades, Johnson & Johnson was held up as a paragon of crisis response. And because in the early 80s there was a product tampering.
Remember that?
Cyanide, several people died. Yeah,
which is why packaging is all different now.
Exactly, because they had a credo, and they decided that they were going to be true to their credo with their organizational values, and so they didn't even hesitate. They pulled all the products off the shelf.
At a great loss. Financially
huge,
great loss.
Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And they revised packaging for over-the-counter drugs. And
they drove the whole industry to do the same thing. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, I think they've lost their way. And maybe they need to go back and read the credo again. Some of the things they've done recently.
When you get away from those core values, it leads you down the wrong path.
Right, exactly. But they were held up as the example of how to respond properly to a crisis because they leaned on their credo.
All right, so that's the beginning of a protocol document. Is your core values. What comes next?
Well, first of all, you got to have an intro so people know exactly what the document's supposed to do, right? But then the meat of the protocol are those philosophically guiding principles, and that's where you go to the mission statement. It's where you go to your vision statement. That's where you go to your organizational values, and build them in terms of how you're going to respond.
And keep it simple.
Right? Again, I'm talking 2 pages max, right?
That's right. So after that comes.
Well, a very short section on the crisis management team's process procedures. Where are you going to gather? And that's the
Who's responsible
communication
for what?
command post, right?
And someone has to be in charge,
right? But it's more of a collaborative environment than just one person, i.e. the CEO, is responsible
one person
for
can't
everything.
do everything, but everyone has to understand their role.
Exactly. Understand your lane.
And understand you're not waiting around to be told to do something.
Right.
Back to the fire drill analogy. You know what to do, go do it.
Go do it. That's exactly right.
And then work within the team.
And so this is a really simple process. Right. And maybe it resembles a checklist. I really don't like that word checklist, but it tells you where you're going to gather and what your initial responsibilities are going to be.
So if you're working as a team, you kind of need a central place to work from, whether it's physical or virtual, right?
Right. Physical is best. You get all the right people in the same room if you can, absolutely. But again, with technology like Zoom and Skype, you can do that virtually as well.
Right.
But the key thing is you get all the players in the same space.
Right, a command post, if you will.
Yep, exactly. And so that you can figure out exactly what you need to do to tackle the problem, right?
So now you got the big stuff. You're narrowing down to what's actually going to happen. You've got a command center working. What comes next?
Well, sometimes there's a need for unit procedures as well. In the CMO conference, there were folks from regional to national to branch, and so sometimes it's necessary to set forth those smaller unit procedures, but it mirrors the protocol. It just helps them understand, okay, I have some responsibilities here that I need to walk
And typically
forward.
you may have responsibilities that you're part of. Everyone's going in the same direction, but then I have to report my activity or my group or our unit up the chain of command because there's someone there who's managing all those units, right?
And that's an important part of that individual unit process as well, and that is communicating up and down the chain of command.
Right. One question that we had at the CMO conference that I think is important in this conversation is how quickly, because your answer to it's good and you're very succinct and emphatic about it. How quickly do you run out the CEO when it comes to crisis communication?
Not very often,
right?
In my opinion, you save them for the really major things, and I think we did have a very good discussion at the conference. But doesn't the CEO, isn't he the most or she the most credible spokesperson for the organization? Yes, but in a very real sense, when you trot the CEO out, you're saying this is a major deal,
right?
And sometimes it's not. I mean, it's a
and
crisis.
You have nowhere to go up from
That's
there.
Exactly right.
If the scenario escalates.
That's exactly right. It's like using your ace pitcher for the entire dadgum game. I mean, it's not going to work very well. So. Only in those situations where it is absolutely critical that you have the face of the organization in front of the cameras.
And then I'm going to piggyback off of that because your CEO, he or she, may be brilliant at what they do, the type of business you run, et cetera. You know, Elon Musk and Mark Cuban and the rest of them, right? But some of these guys are really, and girls are great on camera, some aren't. A great example, Mark Cuban is great on camera. He does it on a regular basis. Elon Musk, not so much, even though he's a brilliant individual.
Right.
So,
leave the blunt at home.
Yes. It's more important to have someone with media training and the relationship with the person behind the camera or writing the story or asking the questions than it is the figurehead.
And following that through and in the conference, I think we got to a really good spot, and that is that you can have subject matter experts who are sometimes even more credible than the CEO.
Right.
So use them.
Yes, and it can answer questions better and more succinctly.
And you know, folks pointed out they don't want to see a public relations person standing in front of the microphone. Well, okay, but that's part of the gig, right?
But they want communication they understand
That's
and can
exactly
process
right.
quickly and easily.
Exactly
and
right.
truthfully.
Look at the way CDC does stuff. I mean, they don't trot out the director.
Sure.
They trot out the subject matter experts.
Right.
So just to kind of close the loop on that, the subject matter expert, if you're not comfortable as the PR professional being the voice of the organization,
you better get comfortable.
then
That's part of your job.
First of all, get comfortable. Exactly right. But then it's also very, very helpful to have your subject matter experts with you.
Yes.
So when you get a question you can't answer, you can turn to he or she.
For sure.
And they can answer it.
Pritch, I think a great example of that is in disaster recovery. When the CDC or or FEMA, I think a great example when I used to work at the United Way of Central Oklahoma, we would have tornadoes, ice storms, et cetera. We had the head of the United Way that started the news conference, but we had fire and rescue and police and volunteer groups represented there so they could answer those specific questions that the media had very succinctly and not a lot of, I don't know, let me get back to you. So putting your experts together and then having that point person, that person responsible, starting and managing the process goes a long way in crisis communication.
Absolutely. And in particular, the early segments of it, subject matter experts are going to do you a lot more good than the CEO. At the critical juncture when you're ready to make a change or you're ready to, there's something major that needs to be said that indicates the organization's commitment to their core values.
For sure.
That's when you bring the CEO in.
There you go. There it is, part 2 of our 2-part conversation about crisis communication, our hour and a half that we did in the room with the YMCA CMO conference. We broke it down into 2 episodes here for you guys on the podcast and on the video. Again, we appreciate you guys tuning in. The slide deck link will be in our social media, and ask questions, topics for other shows in the future, etc.
Yeah.
Anything about crisis communication or anything else we talk about on the Neil Marketing Podcast via our social media, we would appreciate that. And of course, hit that subscribe
Hit
button.
the subscribe button.
So until next time, good luck.
Ciao.